we're going to give the attendees a couple of minutes. It looks like a number of them are checking on right now, so I will start in about 60 seconds. Good morning and happy Valentine's Day. This is Kelly Kofer with the Retail Coach, and we want to welcome you to our webinar this morning. There's two firms, the Retail Coach and KSA, are going to jointly host the webinar this morning. So we're going to be talking about identifying sites and developing a vision to attract retail and retail development to your community. Just a couple of things before we get started. If you have questions as we're going through the webinar, feel free to submit those. I think on your bar on the right-hand side, there's a place for you to send in questions, and we will either address those as we go, if they're relevant to what we're talking about, or we will address them at the end. But we do appreciate you joining us this morning. And we will go first and with a couple of introductions. My name is Kelly Kofer. As we assist chambers of commerce, economic development organizations, municipalities with retail recruitment. We also work with developers across the country as well as retailers. So we are in the retailing industry. And we, through the years, in just over 17 years, we've worked in well over 400 communities in about 30 states. And we have run across KSA on a number of different projects and felt like from the standpoint of being able to provide an A to Z approach that a joint webinar between the Retail Coach and KSA would certainly benefit the audience. So with that, Francois DeCork is representing KSA as well as Eric Davis. Francois, do you want to do a quick introduction, please?
Certainly, and thank you, Kelly, for that introduction. Yes, for the last 17 years, I have been practicing landscape architecture, planning, and urban design in the state of Texas. Before that, I did my graduate studies at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and prior to that, I practiced landscape architecture in South Africa, where I am originally from. I'm currently at KSA Engineering, as Kelly mentioned, and here I am responsible for leading the planning, urban design, and landscape architecture group for the firm. I'm really passionate about the visioning process, which is what I will be talking about in this presentation. Eric.
Good morning, this is Eric Davis. I am the Development Services Manager for KSA. My background is in real estate brokerage, real estate development, and most recently in a lot of structuring of public-private partnerships. Prior to doing work with KSA, I was in 3 different communities as an economic developer. I'm a certified economic developer, and KSA has 2 CEDs on staff. I'm one, and Hunter Hilburn, who's our marketing director for KSA, is also one. I mainly help EDCs, cities, marry in public-private partnerships with developers and help cities get ready to attract developers, whether that's industrial or, in this case, what we're talking about today, retail.
Good. Thank you, fellas. You know, jumping into it sort of as an introduction, you know, I started, as I mentioned, the retail coach over 17 years ago, and I recall one of my first meetings at a Texas Economic Development Council meeting where I got up and introduced my firm and was talking about retail and retail recruitment. At the time, 17 years ago, retail was not considered economic development. Economic development was the more traditional model about recruiting businesses, and rooftops would follow and retail would follow the rooftops. And that still works today. That's still a tried and true fact. But what we have seen, if you fast forward 17 years, that retail is economic development, and much of it's due to the fact that traditional retail or traditional economic development, the definition of it has changed. Not always does traditional economic development filter down to all communities. So obviously, you know, sales tax revenue in many states is what drives municipalities, and retail has become a really quick approach to bolstering sales tax revenues in communities. Coming out of the 2008 recession, retail has changed. I mean, retail was, you know, prior to 2008, they were, you know, retailers were expanding at a really rapid pace throughout the country. And then the recession hit, and basically expansion became very select, and basically retail development stopped. I mean, even now, post-recession, we are seeing across the country speculative development occur in very, very select markets. It's not occurring everywhere. Financing is still an issue, and that, you know, and then there's a number of other factors that are affecting it as well. But retailers are still expanding, but they are looking for the sure thing, and not just the sure thing in a municipality. They have to have the sure thing and the right site, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Is how do sites come into play when a retailer is looking at your municipality, and that becomes you know, a very, very important part of the equation in retailers making an affirmative decision to locate in your communities. You know, our model is built around really three things. There's a number of different things that we do, but it's all around site selection. You know, what retailers look for. What do they need in order to really take a very, very strong look at your community, and what do you need to do to be successful? Retail recruitment's built around current and accurate data, and what I'm talking about is, you know, updated demographics, psychographics, retail gap analysis, those type things. And then really kind of what we're going to focus on today, a lot of, is the vacancies in your community, what level of vacancies are available, and the sites, redevelopment sites and new development sites. And once you have the data and once you have the sites, then you as a municipal leader are responsible for going out and proactively recruiting the retail. It does not happen on its own. At one time, maybe it did, but no longer. You have to proactively go out and recruit the retail. You know, we talked about sites. You know, you must in your community evaluate all available sites, and those are new development sites as well as redevelopment sites. Really, the hottest thing in the market today, and maybe the gentleman Eric can speak to that in a minute, is redevelopment, taking very, very well located properties and offering some level of redevelopment to be able to upgrade the tenant mix and really just offer a much better product. So, you know, it's up to you to make sure that you really have a firm understanding of all available sites in your community. Keep a database. Make sure they're at your fingertips, because, you know, in our practice, when we go to recruit a retailer to a community, one of the first questions they ask is, where are you going to put me? where can I put my business? Send me all available sites that match my locational preferences. So what our jobs are is to anticipate what the retailers are looking for and then providing that information proactively, so you're basically doing much of their work for them. And then you must look at, once you look at the sites and you've determined the sites, is you've got to determine what the highest and best use of those sites are. You know, highest and best use are built around, you know, the economic conditions in your community or one sector of your community where the site's located, you know, the characteristics of the site, and obviously the optimal financial impact. That's what an owner's looking for, is how much money can I achieve from this site? And, you know, from a retail perspective, that's typically looking at a site and making sure that you're optimizing the entire site. And then, you know, as Francois mentioned just a little bit earlier, as far as his experience, the vision of the community. You need to make sure that the highest and best use of your sites coincide with what the vision of your community is. And that's one of the first questions that we ask is, you know, how do you see your community today, and how do you see your community in 5 years and 10 years? And Francois will speak to that and elaborate more on that in just a bit. But from the standpoint of highest and best use criteria, there's a number of different things that we look at. And these are, you know, this is part of what we may call market analysis, and that data collection that I mentioned earlier, is we need to know what's going on in your market. Is it a growing market? Is it a stable market? Or, unfortunately, some are declining markets. Retailers and retail development, they want to go where their risk is minimized, where they can go in and make an investment and know that it is a stable investment. So market conditions are very, very important to them. You know, is it a safe investment to develop in your community? And then the retail trade area population, and most of you are very familiar with this. You know, how far are people driving in to shop, and how far will people drive in to shop at this specific site that we're looking at and we're trying to determine the highest and best use of? And does it have immediate population support surrounding the site? You know, Walmart, you know, in all of our experiences, they have gone in and located on the outskirts of town and really stretch markets out to where they're located. They're what we call a destination retailer. People jump in their cars and they will drive to the Walmart. You know, they will drive to a Cabela's. They'll drive to a Bass Pro. But for the most part, we look at what level of population support surrounds the site, because that is a day in and day out shopper that lives close to the site. And then, you know, once you understand your trade area population, you really need to understand the consumer profile of that audience, of that population. And we'll speak to that in just a second. You know, proximity to anchor retail, other shopping centers, retail clusters, very, very important when we're trying to determine if the highest and best use of a site is retail. Daytime employment, as you can imagine, is key for restaurants. They need to make sure that they have healthy lunchtime businesses as well as dinner businesses, or dinner traffic. So it's all very, very important. And safety, obviously, is incredibly important when you're asking somebody to make an investment in your community. So these are some of the things that we look at initially when we're trying to determine the highest and best use analysis. I mentioned consumer profile. Really important for you to understand the consumer of, you know, profile of your retail trade area. What do they purchase? You know, how often will they purchase it? You know, each retailer has their own consumer profile that they go after. So that's where I go back to having accurate data. Make sure you have the data that a retailer can look at and say, the consumer profile of this retail trade area matches what we're looking for. And what I have on the screen is just an example consumer profile for a retailer. They need a minimum of 60,000 people in a trade area. Their their target audience is a young adult between 25 and 35, then all the way down to what kind of income requirements that they have. Their audience and their consumer is college educated. So, you know, understand who you are, and then put yourself in a position to market your community and market your sites to retailers that fit your consumer profile. This is a quick example of a market that we worked in, talking about highest and best use. And you can see the shaded site in yellow. And, you know, you can see that it is in the middle of a cluster of retail with a strip center just north of it with a fairly strong tenant mix. You've got Home Depot below. And then what's shaded in yellow is an electric supply business. And you look at it and go, okay, with a great road system, with Chili's across the street, with Home Depot south of it, is that in 2017 the highest and best use of that property? I challenge you to start looking at properties in your community. If they be infill situations like this, or they be new development opportunities, don't look at them as they are today. Look at them as what they can be tomorrow. And this is just a zoomed in approach to this site. And you can see, you know, that there's great access to the main thoroughfare. There's circular access around the site. You have Verizon on the hard corner. You have a signalized intersection. All of these point to this site being something of a higher use than an electrical supply company with storage in the back. So when we were looking at something like this, all of a sudden Starbucks and a number of other tenants would come to mind that would anchor a strip center in the back of the site, and also maybe having a out pad fronting the major thoroughfare with a restaurant or similar use that could benefit from the visibility and the traffic. Again, looking at this through the eyes of an investor or a retailer or a restaurant, this electrical supply company is not the highest and best use of this site. Also, I would challenge you to take a look at the shopping centers in your community. You know, there's basically three classifications that we typically use. Class A is your newer construction, your shopping center that, you know, has a lot of amenities, a great tenant mix, meaning that you've got a lot of really strong high tier retailers. The Class B properties are the ones that are just a step below the Class A's. They may be older, but still a really strong mix of tenants, good traffic counts, well maintained. And then the Class C properties, those are the ones that retail has gravitated away from. It could be in an area that has some, you know, we were talking about market conditions a bit earlier. There could be some demographic shifts in the area. You know, the demographic or the consumer profile of the immediate area may not be the same as it was 5-10 years ago. And these properties are the ones that have the most pressure on them in 2017, because some owners still want them to be retail, but there is no retail market for them. So in looking at highest and best use, these Class C centers that we see really across the country need to be looked at and determined if there's alternative uses over and above retail for these types of properties.
And Kelly, if I could jump in, this is Eric right before Francois jumps in. One thing that we're seeing sometimes in these older centers is we would highly encourage you to get your environmental assessments done on those older centers, particularly, especially if they've had dry cleaners or a convenience store with buried tanks in them and so forth. Don't let somebody get out in front of you and talk to you about buying a piece of land that may be dirty and become a nightmare for you. So environmental cleanup might be necessary on some of these older Class C sites. Kelly just showed you a picture of a electric supply company. The first thing that comes to my mind is, oh my gosh, I wonder if they sold transformers at all. Probably not, but if they did and we're sitting on the ground outside, that's an immediate red flag for environmental problems. So just watch them for environmental problems on older sites.
Well, Kelly mentioned the sure thing and the right site. He also referenced highest and best use of a site. Well, what I believe is very important is to link your retail development with the vision of the community. And Sam Walton said that capital isn't scarce, vision is. The remarkable aspect of this vision is the fact that there is money available. People do want to do development. They do want to spend their money on good projects. But if the vision is not there, and that is what Christopher Reeve said, nothing will happen. So I want to encourage you to think about the visioning process and thinking about how can you achieve what you want to achieve for your community, but do it then according to a specific process that you follow. And that is what visioning is. Visioning is truly about a process, and it's about visualizing what your ideas are. Now, the process itself is really about talking to your stakeholders, talking to different communities, to different individuals, various interest groups, and find out and learn about each of those different groups' goals, their values, and what are their desired outcomes. And what is interesting is that you will often find that there is lots of commonalities between seemingly very opposing groups and opposing aspects of a development. But if you understand what the common vision is, the common goals, that way you can truly come to a vision that people can stand by, support, and help achieve for the community. Now, the process also involves that you share the ideas on paper, that you also walk the site. You know, so often the developing aspect of development happens such that people don't even walk the site necessarily, but they have an idea. Well, I encourage people to walk the site, learn about the site, and see what opportunities the site may pose for you. And then share your ideas with the community at large and have meetings where you actually present your ideas to them and get their input and feedback. Well, I mentioned the importance of getting your ideas on paper and have your consultants sketch the ideas out. Let people in your community sketch their ideas out and put them on paper so that you really have something that you talk about. This is just an example of a very simple issue and opportunities map. The idea is broad strokes, big ideas. What are the essence of your site? The visual sight lines, the access, and then the areas where you can actually do some development. At the end of the day, it's really about looking at various options and explore those options for the site. Because if you don't do that, you may come up with one idea, but that's not necessarily the best idea. You want to look at various options, and then from those options, choose the best option for your site, which then can eventually lead to your final graphic that you want to develop for that particular site that you have in mind. And then what is important then is to, once you've captured that, what is that idea, what is that vision that I have, then go back again to your stakeholder group, your technical group, your development community, and make sure that you put in place the policies, the regulations, and the steps and actions in place so that you can actually achieve what you want to achieve with that. And I also want to point out that the graphic itself, can be either very detailed or it can be very loose. It doesn't need to be something very, I would say, crafty and finalized. It's more about the sketching out of the idea very quickly on a piece of paper. And lastly, the visioning of an idea is also very important. And this is the image of a street where you may want to have some improvement for quality of life experiences. Well, add graphics to that, and what it will look like is if someone comes and said, okay, I want to have some outdoor experiences. I want to have the streetscape that brings that quality of life experience to my community. Do it by means of a sketch. Rather do the sketch now, get people to say, yeah, I like the idea, and you can move forward rather than go too far in the process without visualizing exactly what you have in mind. And this same visualization can also be applied to a new site. It doesn't need to be for an existing site. And you sketch out what are these components of my retail development that I want. At the end of the day, it's really about quality of life and the quality of life experiences that you want to bring to a community.
Francois, we have a question of what if the community, if you'll pop back one slide, what if the community's vision does not match the highest and best use? And in this case, what if, as you show as a pocket park, perhaps in a downtown area or in a retail area, well, what if the highest and best use for that on paper, on data points, would show that it is a retail building as opposed to a pocket park? How do we match up the highest and best use with the community vision if they conflict?
Well, I think what is important is to have open discussion and understand the principles of what defines what is the highest and best use. And you know, Eric, what I would suggest is that often what you consider as being the highest and best use is really dependent on that criteria point. And then the question is whether you've also considered one of those criteria points. Well, what is it that people really want to do there? Is that part of the equation? If not, let's go and talk to people and make that part of the decision making for the highest and best use. I think it's discussing it openly, transparently with everyone around the table, that you will end up with a better result, which will include the highest best use, but then will include the vision of the community as well.
Hey, Eric, this is Kelly. Can I broaden that answer just a bit?
Sure.
We work in a lot of municipalities where they're focusing now on downtown revitalization. And, you know, many of the communities have really chased the big box developments, the peripheral developments through the years, really at the expense of their downtown and their downtown environments. So, you know, it's one thing going back to having accurate data of who your consumers are in your market is very key, because we have come in behind a number of different plans and planners that basically were really great plans, but they did not fit the community or the market or the consumers in the market. That's where there's many times a rub between a plan and highest and best use, is because the market, whatever you plan, whatever you illustrate, the plan has to fit the demographic and the consumer profile.
That's a good point.
Good.
And then what I would add to that again is that make sure that you connect that also to what is it that people really want within their community, and seeing that as being a part of that equation when you consider that the highest and best use.
Yeah, I think there's I know we have a lot of smaller town EDC directors and city people on this call, and I see it particularly in the downtown, as Kelly said, where you have a vision of, I want downtown to look like these fabulous town center mixed-use centers, and yet my profile, my consumer profile, is not going to support a Coach Bags and an Ann Taylor and you know, the very high-end retailers. But gee, my mayor really wants that. You know, his wife really wants to shop at Coach Bags or wherever it is. And so you've got to understand the consumer, but the other piece of it is most of the towns I want one of those really nice town centers, and often they have those potentials, as you can see from this site right here, to make their smaller downtown really be great and compete with those bigger centers. So instead of looking like that, you end up, you know, with something that can compete yet matches the consumer profile. Okay, probably enough said about that. Good morning again. I'm going to talk a little bit more in the next few slides. We've talked about the data sets. We've talked about setting the vision. I'm going to talk more about the hard site criteria, if you will. All of these things on here that you see, from traffic arterials, traffic counts, traffic signals and so forth, curb cuts. We're going to talk about zoning, utilities, and then site characteristics and topography in the next few slides. So let's start with the roads, just so that we're all on the same page and talking the same language to our retailers and our developers. They're going to look at major highways. Obviously, if I am a small retailer that wants local traffic, I don't necessarily need or want to pay for high-speed traffic coming through my town. If I am, however, a travel center, I certainly am going to need to be on the interstate. So we're going to start with the major highways, and then we're going to break those down. We might have the thoroughfares next. In this case, you've got the center, Highway 72 and Sam Cooper Boulevard in the center. You've got a loop system around, and interstate loop system around this town. And then finally, the local roads that connect the neighborhoods. And this is where your smaller retail clusters can run along. If you'll notice, between Highway 72 and Sam Cooper Boulevard, there are a lot of connectors that come through there, and all of those can become local retail site opportunities, assuming they're not, zoned residential perhaps. But it connects those neighborhoods. So you need to understand the type of traffic you've got, whether we're talking about walking traffic or long distance traffic or commuter traffic, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. First of all, we want to make sure that we have visibility. The retailers want to be seen, so putting a site on the inside corner of a blind curve is not the kind of visibility we want. It may look really great as a site on paper until you realize that it's on top or on the back side of a blind hill. That becomes a safety factor as well as a visibility factor. The whole accessibility, we want entrances that are easy to get in and out of. Our consumers want to come in and get out of these places easily. Certain types of stores prefer certain sides of the road. For example, if you have a south housing area and a northern employment area, the going home side of the road would be the southbound side, going from employment up north down south. McDonald's, however, wants to be on the go to work side. They want you to grab breakfast and coffee as you're headed northbound from your home up into the employment center. I'm going to let Kelly talk a little bit about far corner, near corners. So in this case, we're going to assume that our housing center is on the south side, just like I said, and that our employment center is on the north side. And so we're going to say that in the morning, the on the way to work route is northbound on the main road, the main street, and then this cross street is a secondary road. There are some issues that you're going to come up with on whether we want to be on the far corner or near corner. Kelly, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and from a site selection standpoint, traffic signals control traffic and the speed of traffic. So, 99.9% of retailers and restaurants would prefer to locate at a signalized intersection. But as retail site selection has moved from an art to more of a science, there's more to look at than just a signalized intersection. And as Eric said, there's something called near corner and far corner. And the graphic on the right shows a site with a near corner, meaning that if there's a traffic signal at the intersection and there's a red light, traffic flow will stack in front of those 2 points of ingress egress. So what happens at that point is people cannot get out of that site onto the main road and head back north. Traffic is such that it will stack in front and cause congestion and just really difficulty in getting in and out of that site. What retailers prefer is what's called a far corner. So if you have the same scenario, red light, traffic stacking back, you still have the ability on the far corner where the CVS logo is located, where you can make an easy right turn in and an easy right turn out to head on the main road. So again, retail site selection has really grown from an art to a science, and this is part of it. Just because you have a corner location does not mean that it is the best corner location. So when you're looking at sites, when you're looking at the community through the eyes of a retailer, keep into consideration in looking at highest and best use and take into consideration the near corner and the far corner.
Very good. Site characteristics you need to look at. Yeah, we've got a corner site, but Holy cow, it's got a great big wetlands area right in the middle of it. It's very hilly. I can't balance the site. In other words, I would have to bring in a huge amount of fill, or I would have to cut a huge amount. I can't figure out how to drain it. I've got retention or detention pond issues. The utilities may or may not be there. If they're not there, how far away are they? And if they are there, are they sized correctly for the type of use? And then soils, we often suggest that, especially on the industrial side, but it works on the retail side as well, understanding how expansive your soils are. It can get very expensive in these expansive clays and so forth to do work in there to get the foundation correct. It's easier to build on rock unless you have to balance the site and cut the rock. I'm here in Austin, Texas area, and you don't have to do a lot to put your foundation down as far as what's under it, but heaven help you if you have to cut away at a hill because there's dolomite and solid limestone rock underneath it, and it's very hard to get through. Likewise, certain parts of the country have very sandy soils that are inexpensive to develop on. So we're going to look at development costs, and the site characteristics drive a lot of costs. Next, I'm going to skip this one and go to a little bit smaller site. We want to kind of go next to how do we as developers look at a site, and often on the smaller sites we're going to start with what fits. This is a almost 6-acre site that a travel center looked at for a restaurant and convenience store, and there's truck areas in the back here for diesel fuel. There's a large amount of car traffic in front on a major highway. We're working with the community and the Department of Transportation on getting a light put on this highway. That's an important piece to this travel center and future development in behind down this proposed road on the left side. So that's what we might call a test fit. Here's a smaller site even. This is a chicken restaurant that is looking at a 0.92 acre site, less than a 1 acre. What we see in quick serve restaurants, fast food restaurants, are double drive-throughs almost exclusively now. Those take a little more room. This is a quick serve 1 acre corner. It's got some topographic issues. We'll need to know about landscape ordinances, tree ordinances. On this side, I would question what the local tree ordinances are. Can I build on this site? Certain areas, that's a big deal. Certain areas, it's not. Austin, Texas, it's a huge deal. You can't go in and cut down hardwoods necessarily. Then we would go just to look at a little bit bigger site. This is Sheboygan, a conceptual plan. And I'm going to let Kelly talk a little bit about this, but this would be a power center pretty much, where you've got the big retailers down here in the bottom left and far right side. You've got a little bit of office and retail thrown in here in this middle section, some more retail up here on the hard corners. Kelly, you want to talk about why this is important to do conceptual planning?
Sure. When we're marketing real estate sites to retailers as well as developers, we have found just through the years that it's really important to be able to show them conceptually what could happen on a piece of property. We have run across in our experience many times where an owner will get antsy to make a sell, and he'll sell the hard corner off, or he'll put a building in the middle of the acreage, which basically makes the remaining acreage much less desirable for development. So what we have done, and we did this in-house, and this is an example of a project in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where we have a 99-acre site that we in-house created this conceptual plan. And again, what we're doing now is we're selling a plan and an idea versus a 99-acre greenfield. So what has resulted from that, it has given a developer the idea that we can actually go in and execute something very similar to this. So it is currently under contract with a developer with 2 letters of intent from national retailers. For one is a big box and one is a middle-sized 30,000 acre box. So again, it's really important because you are selling these sites to the retailer community as well as the developer community, is if you can show them what can happen on a site conceptually, you are far, far ahead, because you're selling, again, not a piece of dirt, but you're selling an idea.
And to tie that into what Francois talked about in vision is, let's also look at how we can make certain projects more walkable, more friendly for pedestrians, almost tourism type uses. You see in the middle of this site, right above the lake, these things called existing, you got vista lines, and those show kind of what our view lines are coming into this center. In this case, we had drawn an amphitheater. This is not, by the way, what is probably going to be developed. This is a Burleson, Texas site. This is probably not what's going to be developed, but again, it sets some of the vision that maybe the community has said. In this case, they wanted an entertainment district, and so this set up different ideas on how to make this very walkable, very pedestrian friendly, and take advantage of some really pretty, a really beautiful site. It's a golf course site. So, and then next is, we all want mixed use developments. So rather than just cram in a standard power center, if you will, and see how many square feet of retail I can get on it, what we're really seeing a lot more of are these mixed use, where you've got a large piece of land. In this case, this is a north of Dallas in Frisco, Texas plan that we did at KSA, that our architecture group did along with our planners. That's retail below and probably office or maybe even residential above. We've got some office here on the back side, on the left side. So it's a mixed use. We've got some retail pads out front, so forth and so on. We're seeing a lot more folks, EDCs and cities, want this mixed use, and we're seeing developers start to do more and more of it. It was scary for them at first to put much second story space above retail. That's changing as we're beginning to see developments go more vertical. Let me just real quickly, I've just got a couple of slides here about some issues that I'm seeing, and I need you that are in the cities especially to be aware of this. Let's start with your EDCs and your cities. How responsive and how friendly is your planning and zoning and your development department? Is your EDC willing to help developers step through the process? If there's one thing you could hear from me today, is that private capital tends to follow the path of least resistance. Developers and their brokers can be rather lazy, and I will tell you that most developers don't particularly trust cities. They're not used to dealing with a lot of cities, other than the city is standing in the way of what I need to do, as opposed to the city is a partner in what I need to do. I think that's really important, that we as EDCs help pop through these and work through these. How long does it take me to get my land entitled? How long does it take the zoning and the use permits and all of those? Time is money for a developer. The longer it takes, the more it costs me to develop in your community, and private capital follows the path of least resistance. And if the community next door has a similar site, I'm going to go where it's a little easier, and I think that the city is going to be a little more friendly to me. How many, along the same lines, how many hoops do I have to jump through? We're beginning to see platting processes cause some real problems in purchases of land. The developers used to buy a piece of land and put it under a 60-day feasibility study. Nowadays, most of my buyers that I help broker want at least 180 days, perhaps longer, in feasibility. And the reason is that the cities are going to make me do a conceptual plat. Not all cities, but we're beginning to see more and more of this. A conceptual or development plat. The next one is a construction plat. And those often require that I have a full set of site engineering documents done. Well, guess what? Those are very expensive. And then I have to go to a final plat and perhaps even a conveyance plat, meaning I can't close on this land because I can't record my plat until the city approves of the full plat and what is going on it, and that requires often full architecture and engineering drawings. Well, now my pre-development costs, before I've even purchased the land, before I've even had it platted and fully entitled, I have spent for up to hundreds of thousands of dollars on my architecture and engineering and other hoops that I've had to jump through, if you will. That becomes very expensive. Hey, it's fine if you're in Frisco, Texas, and you're one of the fastest growing and wealthiest communities in the nation. It's different if you're a not as fast growing town and you're making developers jump through this. And you may find that developers are beginning to talk that XYZ town is very difficult to deal with. Gosh, it's really hard to get anything approved there. And then finally, after I go through all this, what if I don't use them right away? What if I can't get my project financed right away? How long do my entitlements last? Is there an expiration date on them? Am I grandfathered? Is there an annual cost to maintain them? And then ordinances can drive my development cost to often unreasonable levels. You have setbacks such as landscaping setbacks, other types of setbacks. Impervious cover maximums can take valuable space. In other words, I cannot put enough parking on this because I have an impervious cover, meaning I can't concrete the whole site, and I don't want to concrete the whole site, but what if I can only have impervious cover to a maximum of 40%? Well, now I've lost 60% of my site. Tree ordinances and landscaping requirements can get very expensive. We're fighting that here in Austin often. Recently, the best story I can point to is H-E-B, one of our large grocers here in Texas, went to a site, and by the time they got through all of these ordinances I'm talking about down here, they had lost 85% of their site to setbacks, impervious covers, big tree that they couldn't build around or couldn't build under. And then finally, building finishes. For me, this has been something I've been seeing in work that I do with tenants. We recently had a national restaurant that had a prototype of a cedar-sided planked building. It's a very nice looking building, but it was a rustic type of building. And the city said, no, we want all masonry. And so the developer, actually the restaurant direct, came back and said, well, how about if we do a concrete plank, a hardy board, if you will. That's masonry, that's concrete, and we'll make it look like cedar. And they said, no, we want either brick or stone, period. That's what we want on our buildings. Well, that didn't match their national prototype that they were rolling out with hundreds of stores around the nation, and they skipped and left town. And the town was out those incomes, basically, from sales tax. Impact fees can get very expensive. Utility tap fees and building inspection fees we have to watch for, that those don't drive up too much. Now, Francois, you want to jump in here now. I'm telling you all these downsides, but I also want to tell you that developers will play with you if you tell them what the rules are ahead of time. The worst thing that a developer can come across is a city that decides to change the rules midstream. Francois,
exactly.
You want to talk a little bit about what we can do to...
Absolutely. In fact, I'm working on a number of code updates for cities and communities. And one of the first things that we notice when we do our analysis is to see how cumbersome the code is written, and also the inconsistencies is so across the board. And often the reason is because regulations and ordinances are changing and added over time. So what I do is when I look at the code update is to clarify what really is the intent, number one, and then number two, make it simple as possible, so that someone who sits in another city, another area can actually go online and see exactly what are the requirements and see whether he can meet those requirements. At the same time, I believe that those requirements are important because obviously we know that we want to get quality of life settings and environments. It goes at a cost. It's true, but at the same time, if you don't have that in place, you may just not have the residents and the workers that want to live in a better quality environment. So it goes both ways. Understand what you have, understand what you want to achieve with your vision, have codes and regulations that are simple, easy to understand, that does not hamper the developer, but at the same time requires the developer to at least put in the time and the funds to make sure that you do achieve that particular project and the end result that everyone has in mind.
Kelly, I think we're to you again, and we can wrap up with Kelly's
Sure.
final few slides.
Sure. So thanks, Eric. we have talked about, the need for current and accurate data and certainly its relevance and importance. And we talked about site identification and highest and best use and really how that is a determining factor in how we proceed with a site. Now we need to talk about how to put all of that together for you to successfully recruit targeted retailers and developers. Again, when I say targeted, I'm talking about retailers that fit your community and fit your consumer profile. So what you need to think about at this point is, how do you package your community? How do you package your real estate sites? And site selectors, what they are looking for is a reason to visit your community. So without sending them a book on your community and its tourist destinations and things such as that, send them the basic information that they need in order to make a decision to come and visit your community. We are big believers in that you've got to sell your community first and then sell the sites within your community. So, quickly, there are 10 things that they look for, retail trade area population, obviously being incredibly important because that's their market. That's who they're going to pursue. And then from there, you talk about the demographic profile, the psychographic, the buying habits and media preferences of the population, all the way down through your gap analysis, showing where, there are retail category opportunities like clothing, sporting goods, food service, and those type things. So this is where you start, packaging your community and getting it in the front of targeted retailers and developers so they will make the decision to come visit your community. From a site standpoint, same thing. If you're sending a site to a retailer or developer, show where the site's located, show the demographic profile, of the area, as well as don't assume they know where your community's located. Make it easy on them. Again, I mentioned earlier, anticipate what they look for and provide it. And again, make sure you're not sending too much information. I recruited, I was a retail site selector for a national retailer for a number of years, traveling around the country finding sites. And I would receive thumb drives. I would receive, nice glossy books on the community and on the county. And really, what you're trying to do is give them the information that they need in a concise format to get them to visit your community. And again, you've got to be innovative on how you provide that. If you do not have a retail information tab on your website, it needs to be something that you consider going forward. Budget for it next year, because site selectors, real estate brokers, and even developers, they do a lot of research on your community without you ever knowing it. And they do it in hotel rooms, they do it in airports, they do it when they can find the time. So have current, accurate data, have your sites on your website. So again, you're making it really easy for them to get to point A to point Z as quickly as possible. So website presence is incredibly important for your community.
And Kelly, real quickly, the consistency of the information from site to site sure is important so that I can compare 6 different sites with, in other words, please don't send me the broker's info sheets on on each individual broker who each individually works off a different template. You need to have a common template of what you just saw there for your sites.
Yeah, and again, it's your responsibility as a municipal leader, if you're working on some level of retail outreach and site identification, for you to know what the retail community and what the developer community are looking for. And as far as retailers go, you must make sure that they fit your community and fit the consumer profile of the retail trade area before you contact them. Because again, you don't want to waste your time, nor do you want to waste theirs. just as we mentioned, and I believe it was Francois mentioned that, in one of his graphics is, it's not necessarily who we would like to see locate in a community. It's who that we feel like fits the community. Two totally different things. So we always have to manage the expectations of our clients, because inevitably they're wanting a much, much higher tier retail, platform that maybe their consumer profile supports. So make sure that you invest the time and the effort to determine what these retailers are looking for, and make sure that it's a match for your consumer profile.
And you as EDCs, Kelly's going to help you. He'll work with you to match your expectations and to make them realistic. And then your job politically as an EDC person or city manager would be to manage the expectations of your council and so forth. Because again, we run across an awful lot of communities that say, gosh, my mayor really wants me to go after Morton Steakhouse, but that's not realistic, okay?
Right. Good point, Eric. And then, the step further in how you're marketing your community and its real estate sites is, if you're not involved in the International Council of Shopping Centers, you really need to consider it. I think for a municipality chamber ED organization, it's $100 per year. And that is, you get much more than that just from the education aspect of it than the cost of membership. It is really an incredible networking opportunity. We obviously, because we're in the retail recruitment, developer recruitment business, we attend all of the major events across the country. And if you have not been involved, we certainly recommend that you consider attending. Maybe it's a state event that ICSC is putting on. Maybe it's a regional event that they're putting on. But make sure that you get involved, because it really gives you a baseline of how this business works. Site selection's about alternatives. I mean, you need to understand how they view real estate, one site versus the next. It's a great education tool. There's there's state meetings, there's regional meetings, and the big one that I believe last year was roughly 40 to 45,000 people attended, Recon in Las Vegas, and that's May of each year. So, depending on your level of involvement in retail recruitment, you may want to start small and then work yourself up to being able to attend the major ones, and even maybe having a presence with a booth. But you need to get your community on the radar screen of these retailers and these restaurants, and retailers, restaurants, and developers. And when you do go, be prepared to sell your community. Have that accurate data. Have sites profiled to where you're not just there, shaking someone's hand and introducing yourself. You're there to conduct business, and you are well equipped to do so. You have all of the information you need at your fingertips to be successful. And, we've talked about a number of different things. And again, I mentioned get on the radar screen. You have to understand that retail recruitment and developer recruitment is a process, and it's not an event. It takes a while, but you have to make the effort, the proactive effort to do it. What we're seeing is retail must be recruited, and you must have some level of outreach in order to be successful, something that's going to differentiate you in your community from that neighboring community who may be out doing that. So with that, we do appreciate your attendance today. And I would just like to wrap up, if I could, with just a couple of comments. I mentioned site selections about alternatives, comparing site A to site B to site C. And, one of the things and one of the reasons I came across Eric and Hunter Hilburn is, really being able to take a look at one site and determining the development cost of it over another one. And those are really true issues. And, the cost of developing one site may affect its highest and best use. And so those things are incredibly important when you're ultimately marketing those sites to retailers and our developers. And finally, my thought is, look at your community through the eyes of a retailer. You know, we have a saying that you have to have good community development before you have good economic development. So look at your community through the eyes of a retailer, a developer, or an investor, and make sure that their investment in your community is going to be secure. And Eric, Francois, final thoughts?
The last thought that I would like to share is about visioning is to make sure that you really get everyone around the table. It's when everyone share their thoughts and ideas and see the commonalities that you can develop a vision that people will garner around and will help you achieve your goal.
And just some housekeeping. I notice we've had several questions about, is this going to be available? How can I get a copy of it and so forth, a copy of the slides. Kelly, you want to speak to that?
Yes. If you would drop me a quick email, you can see my contact information. We will make this available to you. We can also host it on our website, and would certainly do so. And I would assume that's okay with you and KSA Engineering, Eric.
Sure. Yep.
So, Eric, would you like to address a question or two?
Well, there was one question in here about what software program could I buy to do my own graphics for visioning and for site planning. As a former economic developer, I have tried that. I am not terribly creative, but I had some people that were creative, and I know that that I work for a consultant that does these things, so you wouldn't expect me to say anything other than hire a consultant. But honestly, after trying to do these on my own for too long, hire a consultant. That would be my suggestion. So these don't have to be horribly expensive graphics to develop, but budget something in your economic development for that. Sure, you can go on to InDesign or I don't know, all these other programs and try to draw things on your own. I have seen some really horrendous plans being drawn on sites where water would have to flow uphill to get to the detention ponds. That's not a good idea to be showing a retailer a site and he comes to visit your community and finds out that the site plan you gave him is really totally unworkable. So it really does take the eye of a planner and with a landscape architect engineering background to do these correctly, in my opinion.
That's a good point there, Eric, because it's all about the training of your eye and your hand, and also how you can sketch out something by hand. I mean, and people are trained to do so. So make use of those people. They do have the skills.
I've got another question here. What if the highest and best use does not match the community division?
I think we talked about that. Francois hit that a little bit earlier about how we just got to get more people around the table.
And I want to reiterate, and I think I've thought about it a little bit more and the main thing is that make sure that your criteria for your highest and best use does include what is it that people really want to have for their community, meaning those quality of life attributes that's important to everyone.
Well, and I will just echo an earlier comment I made is, you cannot put a square peg in a round hole. The best plan on paper must be executable, meaning that you have the consumer profile that will support that vision and support that highest and best use of that property. Another question is, where do you
Kelly,
get
I'm sorry, let me jump in real quick on that.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, again, back to this visioning thing. It may not be what gets built. These conceptual plans are almost never what actually gets built. But as a developer, if you want me to invest millions of dollars into a project in your community, I want to know that you have a vision for your community. I just don't want you to come up to me and go, we think it'd be great if you do whatever you want to do here. Well, what's your vision? How do I know that future developers are going to have and be told the same vision so that my investment is protected?
It's very important what you just said now, Eric, is that, yes, that sketch is not necessarily the final result. Yet what that sketch does, it opens up people's minds about the possibilities. and it helps to facilitate the thinking process and getting people ideas on paper that people visualize and say, yeah, I like that, I don't like that. That doesn't become the end result, but at least it helps stimulating some good discussion.
Another question is, how do communities determine their trade area on their own? And, you know, we use cellular phone data. If somebody is in a shopping center, a mall, or in a specific retail building, we can track by, you know, if they're on their cell phone, if they're texting or receiving text, where they live. And we actually go in and we hand draw the retail trade areas around that. That is the best way we have found. Historically,
it's creepy what they know about you. It's just creepy. I'm sorry, these people are just shouldn't be allowed to have that, but they do. They also drive through your parking lots and take pictures of your license plates, and they know where you live. It's creepy. Big Brother is watching.
But
Kelly is Big Brother, I think, right?
Possibly. But historically, radials, you know, how many people live within a 3-mile radius, or if you're a rural community, it may be 25 miles, or a drive time. You know, how many people can reach your community within a 15-minute drive time, or, you know, in West Texas or in Laramie, Wyoming, it may be 60 minutes. So, you know, all of those things can be done by, you know, purchasing data online. Each of them have their limitations, but that is one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is go interview the retailers in your community. They know where their customers are coming from. So go speak to 10 or 15 of them, take a map with you, and say, look, you know, I'm not looking for proprietary information, but I'm trying to determine how far people are driving in to shop the community. And after you speak to 10 or 15, you're going to have a good idea based on road systems and competition and some other things, what the outline of your trade area is. And then from that point, you can draw the trade area around that information and determine the consumer profile of that boundary trade area. One more question that I have, and it's I think come up a couple of times, is, you know, where do you get your data from to assist cities in recruiting the appropriate businesses? Well, you know, the 2017 data just came out 2 weeks ago from ESRI. That's a user, the demographic provider for us, as well as Nielsen Claritas. But, you know, what I would recommend you do in looking for the appropriate businesses is to go on their websites, understand, you know, what they're looking for, and then compare that to who you are, the consumer profile of your trade area, and see if it's a match. You know, I've been doing this in the retail industry for 30 years, so I can drive into a community and look at who's there, but more importantly, who's not there, and that should be there. But just a little bit of research on your part by going online, looking at various retailers' websites, they will show you in detail for you what they're looking for. And that's a good, easy way to do it. And if you don't find it on their website, call their corporate office and say, let me speak to somebody in the real estate department. And then you'd say, are you looking to expand in whatever state you're in? And, you know, would you be interested in my community? The recruitment aspect of it is providing the retailer what they're looking for and proactively contacting them over and over to make sure that they understand that there's an opportunity in your community. I think I will answer one more question, and I appreciate those who are staying on, but the last one is, how long does it typically take to go from a Class A to a Class B to a Class C shopping center? And, you know, that's really a good question, and the answer depends on your community. It depends on you know, is there a lot of growth? And typically, additional growth in retail submarkets causes some distress on some of those shopping centers that are left behind. Meaning, and one thing comes to mind is Dallas, Texas. Dallas was, you know, the retail hub until Richardson, which is a suburb, grew. So Richardson all of a sudden had all of the A shopping centers, and then Dallas had all of the B shopping centers. Then Plano, which is the next progression, grew, and they had all of the A shopping centers, and Richardson had the B's, and then Dallas had the C's, and they had some distress going on. So I would say, based on the growth of your community and the new shopping centers, the new developments with the amenities, really will determine how quickly you're going from A to B to C. And those C shopping centers, as I mentioned a bit earlier, they're the ones in 2017 are the most distressed. They're the ones that really don't have a retail attraction any longer, you know, unless it's just a deep discount firm that wants to come in and pay virtually nothing for rent and just operate out of a shell of a building. And that may be, you know, something that is not fitting the vision of your community. And that's when you need to really start working with the property owner to determine alternative uses for that real estate.
And Kelly, it somewhat goes back to, have you set your vision with quality, and are you demanding quality out of your developers? If you're just letting developers come in because you're chasing the sales tax dollar immediately and that's all you care about, I will tell you that that center will go from an A or A minus probably that it was built as to a C rather quickly, as soon as the market's changed a little bit, but also those are the first to go. You all know what I'm talking about. It's those poorly built, poor looking neighborhood and power centers, as opposed to something that causes people to want to be there. It has those features in it that bring community into that shopping center, as opposed to how many pads can I put up and how much square footage can I get on this site.
Good point. And, you know, people also relocate these days, not necessarily where their job is. They relocate where they have quality of life amenities for them and their families. And if we understand that as municipal leaders, we will understand also then to provide those in the appropriate places, but also the appropriate attributes, which then will make people feel that they want to go and shop at that particular point, and that just creates that synergy for even more attraction and interest in that particular site or area.
Good. Well, Eric, thank you. Francois, thank you so much. And to the audience, we appreciate you attending. And, you know, my email address is ckkofer, C-O-F-E-R, @theretailcoach.net. We will definitely make this available to you, and also we recorded it so we can make an audio copy for you. But we do appreciate your participation, and if there are any needs beyond this, feel free to contact us as well
real
as
quickly,
KSA
I
Engineers.
noticed that I think Francois' email is incorrect. Francois, I believe
Correct. It needs to be FDEKOCK, like my last name on the top line there, Francois de Kock. So it's DEKOCK. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.